Hi, I'm James Garner and I'm reporting from Infosec 2008. We've been talking to two of Microsoft's top senior security experts, Vinny Gullotto and Ed Gibson. Here's what they had to say. How is the threat landscape different in 2008 than it was in 2007?
Well, I think one of the primary differences that we see in 2008 versus 2007 is that, one, the volume of threats continues to go up. Trojans, Trojan downloaders, and adware take precedent numbers today as opposed to any other time in the past. More social engineering and targeted attacks are also what we see as a huge difference. And then, of course, the loss of data being reported today more so than ever around just people losing their laptops, and that number is beginning to shot up as well.
And so what sort of new trends do you see emerging during the course of 2008 and into 2009?
Well, I think what some of the trends that we'll see are around the targeted attacks now, with a good base, unfortunately, being laid down by, if you will, the bad guys, and some folks that aren't necessarily completely bad guys, with the base of information, botnets being put into place, that they can now begin to seed and cultivate more accurate and more data that is really just defined, so that targeted attacks will now pick up. So you might not think, for instance, that any information about you might happen to be on the internet. But next thing you know, you're going to get a mail. And that mail says something specific, and it looks so real and so authentic from somebody that there's a good chance that you're going ahead and, you might bite on it, and then next thing you know, you might lose some money, you might lose some data, you might lose some information, and someone's going to take advantage of that someplace else on the internet.
So it's getting ever more sophisticated then?
Well, it's getting sophisticated, it's getting complex and complicated, and it's also getting so that people today, because they're not hearing about a new virus on BBC this week or one last week on CNN or whatever the case may be, they think, well, the problem doesn't really exist. But if you take a look at some of the data in our security intelligence report that we're going to launch today, you'll find that, 130 million pieces of malicious code we've discovered this year, just out with some of the tools that we use. Adware and Trojans, again, make up about 80% of that. Those programs aren't really designed to do what viruses did 5 years ago, which is just to populate and wreak havoc. They're designed to get information, all right, and to track people's behavior and offer up web pages that perhaps people had no idea they were going to be looking at, a day or two before.
So is malware still a significant problem for companies?
Well, I think pure malware will always be a significant problem. But if you take a look at some of the numbers again, real good old-fashioned viruses, the numbers just aren't that large. Now for the enterprise as opposed to the consumer, the challenge is that to a network in some cases, or to a bad guy, there's no difference between what a consumer looks like at home and what they look like at the enterprise. There's a little bit more of a challenge for them to get into the enterprise. Therefore, enterprises have to, of course, continue to harden the network, harden the availability to the data by perhaps looking at ways to encrypt it, authenticate the data a bit better, allow access, not allow access. That becomes a challenge for the network administrator. That's going to find its way out to the consumer space as well at some particular point in time, in which we need to get the consumer adjusted to the fact that those pictures that they have on their computer, or that information about where they store something that they want to do for online shopping, now becomes precious.
So consumer education is one of the key things in terms of fighting crime on the internet at the moment, in terms of security.
Well, always educating the consumer, and letting them know what's happening, again, because they're not hearing something, it's not in their face. Some people have a tendency to think, well, it's not that much of a problem, right? But meantime, their machine has been exploited, it's been compromised, it may be controlled or part of some botnet ring. So while we have consistent guidance that we give to people around, make sure you've got good anti-malware, make sure you've got security updates, make sure your firewall, make sure you don't double click on anything. It's an old message, right? But it's one that does work and needs to be repeated over and over again. And then you add in what's current to the specific mix and the flavor of the day.
So in the enterprise space, companies still need to be, make sure they've got good malware in terms of, there's still threats from malware and that issue.
Yeah, at the enterprise level, clearly having, in-depth or a depth and defense strategy all the way at the perimeter, people starting to use more online services, people are starting to use security as a software services, right?
Yeah.
So making sure that you understand how your vendor is working and get you prepared for that. It's just a constant challenge.
Okay. Now you've been with Microsoft for 18 months. How is things different in your in this role? 18 months on.
Well, I think one of the biggest differences for me is that today I'm seeing data that I never saw before in, if you will, my previous life, because of the sheer volume and the scope and the visibility that Microsoft has into literally 400 million machines a month running our MSRT program, right? We've got 52 million plus Defender users. I can see more data than ever before and really give information to folks like yourselves, educate the consumers, educate the enterprise, and then look at strategies in which we can understand how the threat event itself is evolving and how it's working, to then take that information, share it with our partners, share it with resellers, share it with the folks making the next version of the operating systems and applications to make sure that we can see where things are going and then be better prepared.
Vinny, many thanks.
Great, thank you.